Hey, good morning. This is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader, and I'm here today to do a tag video. This tag is called I Love the Book, I Love the Movie, and the originator of this tag was a person called Game of Authors, and he is a new booktuber, and this was his first video, so yay to him for that. I've seen a lot of great versions of this tag, and anyway, seek them out if you want to. They're a lot of fun. This is just a really fun tag and a good way to talk about a few books where you've liked the book and you like the movie. And they're not necessarily the best books, although some of them are very close to some of the best books I've read. And the movies are also great. So let's get started. Okay, the first one I want to talk about is, well, I'm doing a pair. When we were kids, I remember my parents dropping us off at the movie theater for like a Saturday matinee. And the two movies that were playing were Charlotte's Web and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So those are two books that are fantastic books for kids and for looking back if you're feeling nostalgic and you want to read them again. But I don't know if I'd read the books before I saw these two films, but I sure did go out and find them and read them afterward if I hadn't read them before. It's a long time ago, you guys. I don't remember that far back. But the movie, the Charlotte's Web movie from 1973, the voice actors were Debbie Reynolds, Paul Lynde, and Henry Gibson. And it's full of frolicking music and just the right amount of coming of age angst and the fear of death. And they're just, I think it does a great job of capturing the spirit of the novel, which the novel was great too. And then the book is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but the movie was called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And, you know, Roald Dahl's children's books are highly entertaining, and especially when you're a kid, I think, just to step into those very kind of absurd imaginary worlds and see some terrible human behavior played out in the books, and then everyone's laughing at the conceit. So great books. Those are the only kids movies that I have on the list. The next one I want to talk about is Housekeeping. It was a novel written in 1982 by Marilynne Robinson, and then the movie came out in 1988, directed by Bill Forsyth, and it starred Christine Lahti as the Aunt Sylvie, who comes to this really small town after her nieces had been orphaned and taking care of a grandmother not very well, and she comes to town. She's very odd. The town doesn't know what to do with her and doesn't know what to do with these girls. I remember we went to the independent movie theater to go see this, and I think my grandma went, and my mom, and my sister, maybe my aunt, I'm not sure, but I remember we all went to this movie, and I had not read the book at that point, but it's so atmospheric. The photography is stunning. There's pine trees and lakes and railroad trestles, and it just has such an atmosphere, and you really feel kind of the claustrophobia of living in this small town while with all eyes watching you. And the acting's really good, and it's really quirky, sad, a great version of the novel. So those two things I think are very complementary. Next we have Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. There was a movie that came out in 2012, and it was starring Tom Hanks. I thought that this was a kind of amazing adaptation of a very confusing and very challenging novel structurally, and I think the movie handled it brilliantly. I talked about this a lot more in my Tom Hanks retrospective video that I made last year. I'm sure many of you probably haven't seen it. I would say that it's an odd, quirky video that just talks about my husband and I watching every Tom Hanks movie chronologically over 18 months and what my assessment was at the end. And so I'm going to leave a link down for that below. But Cloud Atlas was one of the top movies that I saw out of all those Tom Hanks movies. Okay, next we have The World According to Garp by John Irving. The book came out in 1978, and then in 1982 there was a film adaptation with Robin Williams, Mary Beth Hurt, Glenn Close, and John Lithgow. And this, I thought they did a very good job of adapting a fantastic novel. I love that novel. I read it. I was quite young when I read it. I'm sure I didn't understand all of what was happening in that book. The sexual politics of that book probably went right over my head, but I did love, I was reading all of John Irving's books as they were coming out during the late 70s and early 80s, and I thought the movie, I think it goes in a little bit different direction, and I can't remember exactly because I haven't seen it in so long, but the acting performances in that movie were great. All right, next we have Little Women. I've talked about this numerous times on my channel. I really like the 1933 and the 1994 versions of the adaptation of this movie. The 1933 version was directed by George Cukor with Katharine Hepburn and a bunch of other great actresses of the time. It has a lot of spirit. It's beautiful because it's in black and white, and it just really has a very Christmassy feel to me. I love that movie. The 1994 version with Susan Sarandon and Winona Ryder is also good. Different, has a different feel to it, and you know I'm definitely looking forward to the 2019 version that's coming up very soon. The PBS miniseries from last year of Little Women I didn't really care for. Okay, it's Jane Austen time. First we have Pride and Prejudice. I think everyone who's watching this knows everything about this novel already. Girls, not married, looking for husbands. They have the inheritance laws of England are horrible to women, and they are basically either going to be spinsters in poverty or they're going to find husbands. And you know, that's the premise of the book. The adaptation I really like is the BBC version with Colin Firth. Fantastic. Then the 1990, I think it was 1995 version with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden. It's also fun, but it's very hard for me to think now of going back to watch that version because Matthew McFadden is in one of my 2019 favorite series called Succession, and he plays one of the world's worst people, or at least one of the worst people in that family. Also, he's strangely sympathetic, and he's such a good actor, but I don't see him as particularly romantic as a Mr. Darcy compared to playing in Succession. So if there are any Succession fans out there, let's talk in the comments. What a season that was, wasn't it? It was great. Jane Austen Part 2, Sense and Sensibility, another movie about marriage and sisters and betrayals and manners, a comedy of manners, and the version of the movie that I love, from 1995 with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet and Alan Rickman and Hugh Grant is really a perfect movie. It's so good. If I had to rank these, and I told you I'm not going to rank them, it would be probably in the top 3. Next, I have Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. I'm sure a lot of people on BookTube talk about this quirky, I hate the word quirky. It's a very eccentric character, Olive Kitteridge. She's very grumpy, but she's also very influential in her town in Maine. And so Olive Kitteridge is a book of connected short stories, and each one features Olive in some subtle way, but it's definitely about her at the core, and her marriage to Henry. And it's a beautiful novel, and the HBO miniseries with Frances McDormand and Richard Jenkins is another, I would think, perfect adaptation. The casting is perfect. Everything about that evokes the feeling of the book. So if you don't feel like reading the book, I'd say check that one out. Although I think it would take as long to watch as it does to read. It's not very long, so. Okay, next I have True Grit by Charles Portis. This is a Western. It's, the protagonist is, I think she's a 12-year-old girl who is out for vengeance for the murder of her father, and she hires a hitman, and it's about all of the hardships of them tracking down her father's killer and what happens to the horses. It's highly tense. It's a hilarious book, too. There's so much humor in it. The main character, I think her name is Maddie, is just, she's beyond her years, and she's full of vengeance and anger, and the relationship between she and the hitman is really tender too. So it's a really good book. If you love Lonesome Dove, and I know a lot of you do, and you love other, if you're willing to read Westerns, this is a novel that is not to be missed. The movie that I like out of this is the 2010 Coen Brothers movie with Matt Damon and Josh Brolin, Jeff Bridges, and Haley Steinfeld. The acting is really good. I think it's pretty true to the novel and the feeling of it. The John Wayne version movie I didn't really like very much. I don't think John Wayne is a very good actor. He was probably better in True Grit than he was in some of his other films, so I'll give him that. And I'd say if it were on cable and there was nothing else on, I would watch it, but I prefer the Coen Brothers version. Okay, here we go. The last one I have on my list is The Leftovers by Tom Perrotta. I thought this was a really good book just on its own, and I like the story, I like the premise of it, and I like the characters. Basically what happens in The Leftovers is that there is a rapture-like experience. A number of people disappear from Earth with no explanation. All the people who are left on the planet, society kind of shifts, and a lot of things happen. Their cults rise up, and it's basically a novel about grief. And the HBO series takes, the first season is the book, and then the second season it reimagines the entire thing and it expands the storyline, and it's visually beautiful, well acted, it's piercingly sad. There is so much grief and terror and bewilderment, and then also some happy moments too, and the connections between the characters are very deep, and it's surreal at times. It's dreamlike, but I think it's kind of the perfect story for the time we're living in right now, which is also full of grief and bewilderment and surrealism and all of the things that we're experiencing as we watch the news every day. So I do think The Leftovers is really kind of the embodiment of at least my psyche. And so check it out if you're interested. I would say that actually the adaptation is better than the book if you can only choose one, but why did you have to choose only one? You can do both, right? And that's all I have for now. I'm not tagging anyone. Consider yourself tagged. Consider this a prompt and do the video if you want to. That's what I did, and I feel good about it. So I will see you in the next video, and thanks for watching. Bye. P.S. I wanted to add one more thing, and so I'm sneaking this in at the end if you see it. Thanks for sticking around, but I wanted to give a movie recommendation for a movie that's in the theater right now, and that's called Parasite. And it's a South Korean movie. My mom and I saw it this last weekend, and it was fantastic. It was, I don't want to tell you anything about it other than you should see it. You should know nothing about it before you go because it's full of twists and turns. Let's just say it's about a family who's trying to better their lives in South Korea, and we'll go from there. But I highly recommend it. It's definitely going to be on one of my best films of 2019 list. So just check it out if you're interested. Bye.